An old woman observed how, with scientific precision, her rooster would begin to crow just before the sun rose each day. She therefore came to the conclusion that the crowing of her rooster caused the sun to rise. So when the rooster suddenly died, she hastened to replace it with another, lest the sun fail to rise the following morning. One day she fell out of favor with her neighbors and decided to move out of the village to live with her sister a few miles away. When her rooster started to crow the next day, and a little later the sun began to rise, she was confirmed in what she knew all along. The sun was now rising here, and her village was in darkness. Well, they asked for it, she said to herself. It did cause her to wonder why, however, her former neighbors never came to beg her to return to the village with her rooster. She just put it down to their stubbornness and their stupidity. The saying from the cross that I want us to reflect on this week is the saying from Luke's Gospel, where Jesus says, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." Now, in the little book on the sayings of Jesus from the cross that I wrote a few years ago, in the chapter dealing with this saying, I reflected on the first part of the saying, "Father, forgive them." Today, I want to reflect on the second part. They do not know what they are doing. We think, like the woman who owned the rooster, that we have the answers. And yet we may not even know the questions. We do not know that we do not know, and so we do not know what we are doing. Pilate wants to release Jesus. Now, Luke does not picture Pilate in his account as some noble, well-intentioned Roman governor who wants to release Jesus because he knows that Jesus is innocent. Rather, Pilate is a political opportunist, but he does know that Jesus is no threat. He thinks that if he has Jesus flogged, there are people who die from flogging. It was an intense form of punishment. And he thinks that if he has Jesus flogged, that will satisfy the Jewish leaders. It does not. Well, rather than upsetting the makeshift peace that he has with the Jewish establishment, or rather than risk inciting new interests or desires for revolt against the empire, Pilate hands Jesus over to the soldiers to be crucified. He does not know what he is doing. The Jewish leaders force Pilate's hand. They will not settle for anything less than Jesus' death. And to make sure that Pilate listens, they accuse Jesus of claiming to be a king, claiming to be a rival to Caesar. These Jewish leaders have no regard for any Roman in power, and they will not let Pilate get the best of them. Jesus must die, and Pilate must give the order. They do not know what they are doing. And then there are the Roman soldiers who cast lots for the robe that Herod put on Jesus when Pilate at the beginning sent sent Jesus to him. The soldiers offer Jesus sour wine on a sponge in a playful act of cruelty. They mock him and they make sport of him. These soldiers have become quite desensitized to the terrible suffering and cruelty they inflict. We wonder how many crucifixions they have been part of. And for them, it's all in a day's work. And surely they convince themselves the victims have it coming. They do not know what they are doing. And then there are the bystanders. This is not the same crowd that hung on Jesus' teaching earlier in the week, and certainly not the same crowd that Jesus led by procession into Jerusalem in a kind of peace march. This is a crowd assembled at the invitation of the chief priest. And they show their appreciation by joining the Jewish leaders in the dehumanization of Jesus, jeering and mocking and repeating what the priests and the scribes were saying. They do not know what they are doing. I mean, little do any of the actors and players in the crucifixion know that in their unawareness and ignorance, they are all descending down a path into a moral abyss with each step downward. Their own humanity is diminished. In The Lord of the Rings, Gollum, you will remember, is a scheming, pitiful, deformed little creature obsessed with possessing the ring. He wasn't always like that. It was his possession of the ring that led to his dehumanization. That changed him from a human being into this groveling, pathetic, shriveled creature full of darkness and deceit. And still, he's consumed with the ring. He wants the ring back more than anything else. Sam and Frodo find themselves lost in the Misty Mountains, traveling in circles as they make their way to the Mountain of Doom, where Frodo intends to drop the ring into the Mountain of Fire, thus destroying it. Well, here they run into Gollum, who has been tracking them, and Gollum, who knows his way through the Misty Mountains, agrees to help them, all the while plotting to steal the ring back. Sam despises Gollum, and Sam is harsh and is demeaning towards him. Finally, Frodo confronts Sam. Why do you do that? Call him names and run him down all the time. And Sam responds, because that's what he is, Mr. Frodo. There's not left in him but lies and deceit. It's the ring he wants. It's all he cares about. Well, Gollum is the ultimate narcissist. Looking sadly at Gollum, Frodo says, you have no idea what it did to him. I have to help him, Sam. Frodo understands the destructive power and influence of the ring. Sam asks, well, why? And Frodo says, because I have to believe he can come back. The ring could be the power of the little self, the ego, the false self, what Paul in his letters calls the flesh. It could be what Paul calls in one of his letters the principalities and powers that apply enormous pressure on us to conform to the systems of injustice that we all participate in. Frodo has to believe Gollum can come back, that Gollum can be saved, because Frodo knows what the power of the ring is doing to him. It is pulling him down into that moral abyss, into the darkness. And with each step downward, he feels himself becoming something less than human. Can those who do not know that they do not know, can those who do not know what they are doing come back? Be redeemed, be healed, be restored to full humanness? Jesus made it clear what it takes. The biblical tradition calls it repentance. One must decide to change. One must turn around. One must decide to deny the little self. One must refuse to be conformed to the world, refuse to submit to the principalities and powers that want to shape us, form us into their own mold. I have to believe he can come back, says Frodo. But for that to happen in any of our lives, we must come to know that we do not know. And we must admit that we do not know what we are doing. I invite you this week to reflect on your own life and ask yourself this question. What is it that I am doing that keeps me where I am, that prevents me from becoming more, that pulls me down into something less than what I am? What is it that I am doing and yet do not know that I'm doing? And how do I come to know? How do I become aware?